They banned our family snowmobile trail at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday. HOA president filmed the whole thing. Concrete truck roaring in, pouring right over our 60-year-old gravel path. Chairlift spinning behind her. 4,000 weekend skiers, $600 per night, luxury chalets packed solid, peak season money flooding in like snow.
No more redneck noise pollution.
She smirked into her phone. Designer boots stomping our trail to rubble. Victory video blasted everywhere. Smug smile, zero regrets. She posted it proudly. Laughed about silencing the locals. What she didn't know? My grandfather's 1963 contract was sitting in my pocket like a loaded gun. That celebration clip she uploaded? Straight up evidence. She thought she was ending our trail. Turns out she just handed me the keys to end her empire. Most expensive victory dance you've ever seen? Drop your story below. This one's about to cost her everything she owns. My name's Garrett Thornfield, and I've been fixing broken things for 30 years. Engines, equipment, people's problems doesn't matter. But some things shouldn't need fixing, like a handshake deal your grandfather earned crawling through Nazi gunfire. I inherited 47 acres of Montana mountain land when Dad passed in 2018. Rocky soil, steep grades, trees that'll cut you if you're not careful. But it came with something priceless. A snowmobile trail easement connecting our property to 12,000 acres of state forest through the only mountain pass for 60 miles. Grandfather Ezra fought for that trail from 1963 to 1968. Not with bullets, he'd had enough of those in France, but with lawyers, surveys, and mountain stubbornness that only comes from watching your buddies die for freedom. Every winter morning growing up, I'd hear the distant growl of snowmobiles echoing off granite cliffs. That sound meant everything was right with the world. The sharp bite of pine sap mixed with two-stroke exhaust was my childhood soundtrack. Christmas mornings meant family rides to backcountry hunting camps. Summer evenings meant maintaining trail markers by hand while grandfather's rough-as-bark hands taught me to read property surveys by kerosene lamplight. "This trail ain't just about recreation, boy," he'd say, tracing deed lines with his calloused finger. "It's about keeping the mountains free for mountain people." 40 families used that trail for hunting, recreation, emergency access. Without it, reaching the backcountry meant a 90-mile detour around the mountain range, 3 hours each way versus 20 minutes. Every January, we held Ezra's Run, a memorial ride honoring grandfather's legal victory. Local tradition built on local sweat and 3 generations of stewardship. Then Vivian Blackthorne arrived like a plague in designer boots. She bought the $2.8 million executive retreat adjacent to my property in March 2023. Fresh transplant from San Francisco, where she'd spent 20 years as a corporate compliance attorney specializing in regulatory optimization. Fancy talk for finding legal ways to crush little people under bureaucratic paperwork. Within 6 months, she'd gotten herself elected HOA president of Glacier Ridge Mountain Estates. 12 members total, mostly wealthy transplants who'd discovered our quaint mountain charm and decided it needed their expensive improvements. Vivian had big plans. She complained about snowmobile noise, disrupting her meditation practice, claimed our trail reduced her property value, wanted to convert the area into a wildlife sanctuary, which really meant private hiking trails for HOA members only, keeping the locals out of their own mountains. The smell of trouble started in October 2023. Expensive cologne mixed with entitlement, drifting down from her heated driveway like toxic fog. First, she tried the friendly approach, knocked on my door with store-bought cookies and a legal briefcase. "Mr. Thornfield, I'd like to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement regarding that noisy trail." I told her the trail wasn't negotiable, been in my family longer than she'd been alive. Her plastic smile cracked like thin ice. 2 weeks later, the certified mail arrived. Morrison, Keller and Associates, San Francisco's most expensive environmental law firm. The letterhead was thick as cardboard, reeking of her perfume and pure arrogance. Their message: cease all trail use immediately or face $500 daily fines plus legal costs. Their claim? Our 1963 easement was invalid due to modernized environmental regulations. Complete fiction, but backed by lawyers charging $800 an hour to manufacture legal nightmares. The impact was immediate and devastating. 3 local families stopped using the trail out of fear. The Snowmobile Club panicked. They couldn't afford a legal war against San Francisco money. I watched 60 years of community tradition start crumbling because one entitled transplant decided mountain people didn't deserve mountain access. But Vivian had made one critical error. She assumed we were too poor, too stupid, too beaten to fight back. She'd never met a family that keeps receipts going back to World War II. Vivian's next move came 3 weeks later, and it was pure corporate sleaze wrapped in legal legitimacy. I was welding a cracked axle housing when diesel exhaust cut through the pine-scented mountain air. A truck with official-looking magnetic signs pulled up to my property line. Some guy in a hard hat started setting up surveying equipment like he owned the place. "Morning," I called out, wiping grease off my hands with a rag that smelled like honest work. "You got permission to be here?" The surveyor barely looked up. "Environmental boundary assessment for Blackthorn Holdings, LLC. Just doing my job." Environmental boundary assessment. Corporate speak for, "We're about to steal your land with fake paperwork." For 3 days, this clown tramped around with his equipment, taking photos, moving survey stakes, making notes like he was documenting war crimes. The metallic snap of his measuring tape echoed through the trees like gunshots. Every morning brought the same routine, diesel fumes mixing with the stench of manufactured legitimacy. Then I caught him red-handed. Thursday afternoon, I was checking fence line when I spotted him hammering new boundary markers 15 feet inside my property. Not a surveying error, deliberate theft dressed up as professional assessment. I walked over, casual-like, boots crunching on frost-covered pine needles. "Find something interesting?" "Yeah, actually." He pointed at his fraudulent markers with the confidence of a man who'd never been questioned. "Looks like the original 1963 survey contained mathematical errors. Property line should run through here. Mathematical errors. From the same surveying company that mapped half of Montana in the 1960s. Either this guy was an idiot, or he thought I was. Mind if I check your credentials?" His face went white as January snow. Turns out his Montana surveyor's license had expired 2 years ago. His professional-grade equipment looked suspiciously like Harbor Freight Specials, the same store where I buy disposable tools for dirty jobs. When I called his business number, it went straight to disconnected voicemail. Back in my Army days, we learned that using fake credentials to access restricted areas carried serious federal time. Didn't matter if you were stealing military secrets or property boundaries. Fraud was fraud, and Montana judges didn't appreciate either one. But Vivian's fake surveyor gave me something better than evidence. He gave me ammunition. That night, I installed my hunting trail camera on a pine tree, disguised as a birdhouse. Solar-powered, motion-activated, cellular upload straight to my phone. 30 years of hunting teaches you patience. Sometimes the best strategy involves sitting still and letting prey walk into your trap. Friday morning delivered pure gold. Vivian's black BMW crunched up my gravel driveway, designer hiking boots clicking like angry insects on stone. She met with her fake surveyor right there in 4K resolution, handing him an envelope thick enough to choke a horse. "I don't care what it costs," she said, voice crystal clear through my hidden microphone. "Move those markers wherever you need to. These people don't understand property law anyway." These people, like we were some kind of subspecies that crawled out from under rocks. The arrogance made my teeth itch. The audio captured every damning word. There's a $5,000 bonus if you can find creative interpretations that support our environmental case. Monday morning, I called the state licensing board. Reported unlicensed surveying operations with video evidence of cash payments for creative boundary interpretation. The response was swift. State investigators arrived Tuesday with warrants and attitudes. The fallout was immediate. Fake surveyor faced federal charges within a week. Vivian's property deed went under investigation for potential fraud. Her insurance company started asking uncomfortable questions about fraudulent surveys voiding title coverage. Local newspaper picked up the story. City lawyer versus mountain family round 2. The town diner buzzed like a kicked hornet's nest. Every coffee cup clinked with barely contained satisfaction. 3 HOA members quietly contacted me, expressing private support for our position. But the investigation revealed something much bigger. My fake surveyor friend turned very chatty with federal agents, especially after they mentioned 10-year prison sentences. Vivian wasn't just some retired lawyer playing HOA power games. She was connected to Pinnacle Resort Development Corporation, shell companies, million-dollar land purchases, and a laser focus on controlling access to state forest lands. Her BMW speeding away from my property that Tuesday sounded like retreat, gravel spitting under spinning tires. But I knew corporate types don't retreat after one loss. They just regroup with bigger weapons. Phase 2, she'd mentioned during that heated phone call with her lawyers. Whatever that meant, my trail camera stayed up, motion sensors ready. The real war was just beginning. Vivian's Phase 2 hit like a sledgehammer wrapped in scientific paper. I found the notice taped to my shop door on a Tuesday morning that reeked of trouble and expensive cologne. Montana Department of Environmental Quality. Emergency investigation into severe ecological damage caused by our family trail. 47 pages of pure fiction, complete with professional photographs and expert testimony from Dr. Marcus Fieldstone, Ph.D. in environmental bullshit. According to this masterpiece, our snowmobiles were single-handedly destroying rare alpine ecosystems, contaminating groundwater, and probably causing climate change. The photos showed devastating erosion damage that any local would recognize as natural spring snow melt, destroyed vegetation that looked suspiciously like deer bedding sites, and the crown jewel, rare alpine flowers being systematically eliminated by recreational vehicles. The emergency closure request demanded immediate trail suspension pending an environmental impact study. Timeline: 6 to 18 months, assuming we could prove our innocence with our own money. Wednesday morning brought the state inspector, Dakota Rivers, 34, fresh from university with a clipboard and expectations of finding an ecological disaster zone. The crunch of her official boots on our gravel sounded like Judgment Day approaching. Instead, she found something that stopped her dead. Our trail was pristine. 60 years of mountain stewardship had created a model of sustainable recreation. Hand-built drainage channels prevented erosion. Native grass plantings stabilized high traffic areas. Strategic barriers channeled traffic away from sensitive spots. "Where's the damage?" Dakota asked, her voice carrying the confusion of someone whose paperwork didn't match reality. I pulled out my father's documentation. 40 years of voluntary environmental reports, soil tests, vegetation surveys. Back in my military days, we learned that pre-existing use trumps new environmental regulations when actual damage can't be proven. Federal law requires documented harm, not hypothetical impact, for emergency closures. That's when I showed her Vivian's smoking gun. Those rare alpine flowers being destroyed by snowmobiles? I'd tracked them down to their natural habitat, the garden center at Home Depot. Purple petunias that don't naturally grow above 3,000 feet elevation. The high-resolution photos still showed plastic price tags if you looked close enough. Apparently these endangered species bloom year-round at garden centers, I told Dakota, who was struggling not to laugh at the evidence. Dr. Elena Vasquez from the State University arrived the next day for a real environmental assessment. Her field report was devastating to Vivian's case. Minimal environmental impact, soil cleaner than most suburban neighborhoods, zero evidence of systematic ecological destruction. But during her investigation, Dr. Vasquez discovered something chilling. The fake environmental report included detailed topographical surveys, water table analysis, and soil composition data that had nothing to do with snowmobile damage and everything to do with construction planning. That's when things got interesting. Vivian arrived at the investigation site in her BMW, reeking of desperation and designer perfume. I watched her approach Dakota with what looked like a business card and a very specific conversation about consulting opportunities after the investigation concluded. When that failed, she tried threatening Dr. Vasquez. "I hope the university values its environmental program funding," she said, voice going shrill as a dental drill when cornered with facts. Some donors don't appreciate biased research. But the discovery process during the investigation revealed Vivian's real agenda. Property records showed shell companies had purchased 847 acres surrounding the area. Email trails connected her directly to Pinnacle Resort Development Corporation. Total investment: $15 million in recreational development contingent on eliminating competing trail access. Dakota's official report hit like an avalanche. Environmental complaint dismissed with prejudice. Dr. Fieldstone faced federal charges for filing false scientific reports with fabricated evidence. Vivian's threats against university funding triggered additional federal investigations. The local environmental groups that had initially supported Vivian's complaint switched sides after seeing the evidence. The Audubon chapter publicly apologized for being misled by corporate interests masquerading as conservation. Town meetings erupted in shouting matches. You could hear the anger 3 blocks away. But Vivian's mask had completely slipped. Recorded conversations revealed her saying, "I don't care about environmental protection. I just need legal leverage to eliminate recreational competition." Friday afternoon, her BMW roared past my shop toward town, gravel spitting like machine gun fire. The urgency suggested someone about to deploy much more expensive legal weapons. I'd cost her 2 rounds of corporate warfare. Phase 3 was coming, and this time she'd bring the kind of lawyers that specialized in destroying mountain families. Vivian's nuclear option arrived on a Monday morning like a legal avalanche. Not 1 lawsuit, 3. Simultaneous filings in state court, federal court, and administrative court, each designed to crush our family under legal fees that could bankrupt a small town. The paperwork weighed more than my engine block, delivered by process servers who looked like they'd rather be serving divorce papers to friendlier folks. The centerpiece was pure evil genius. Americans with Disabilities Act violations. According to Vivian's $800 an hour legal army, our family trail had systematically discriminated against the disabled community for 60 years by failing to meet federal accessibility standards. Damages, $2.7 million. Alternative, rebuild the entire trail for wheelchair access or pay $500,000 in penalties. The legal trap was beautifully crafted. Building wheelchair ramps on 40-degree mountain slopes was like installing elevators in trees, physically impossible. Either way, she'd eliminate our access while looking like a civil rights champion. 3 law firms working in coordination. Corporate tax attorneys who'd never handled disability cases suddenly passionate about wheelchair access to backcountry hunting grounds. The smell of expensive leather briefcases and manufactured outrage filled the courthouse like a funeral parlor. By Wednesday, my legal costs hit $47,000 and climbing faster than gas prices. Insurance companies started making threatening calls about litigation risk affecting coverage. The bank manager suggested settling over coffee that tasted like liquid anxiety. "This is affecting your business credit, Garrett. Maybe it's time to be practical." Practical. Like abandoning everything my grandfather died protecting was somehow reasonable. But Vivian had made one critical miscalculation. She assumed mountain people were too ignorant to understand federal law. Wrong on both counts. Back when I was helping my Army buddy Jake navigate VA disability benefits, I learned that wilderness areas and primitive trails established before 1990 were specifically exempt from ADA requirements. Private easements had grandfathered status that no amount of corporate money could overturn. And filing frivolous ADA lawsuits carried mandatory sanctions that could bankrupt the plaintiffs. The disabled veterans group mobilized like we were under enemy fire. "This woman doesn't speak for us," declared Tom Hensley, Purple Heart recipient who'd lost both legs in Afghanistan. "She's using our community as a weapon against people who actually serve others." Our crowdfunding campaign raised $23,000 in 48 hours. Local businesses donated legal research time. The American Legion Post offered their conference room for strategy meetings that smelled like strong coffee and stronger determination. But Vivian's desperation was showing in increasingly ugly ways. 3 local business owners received anonymous threats. My shop insurance got mysteriously canceled. Trail supporters' children were harassed at school by private investigators who looked more like corporate muscle. The sound of black SUVs cruising Main Street became as common as morning coffee. I recorded her phone call to the newspaper editor. "I don't care about disabled people. I just need legal leverage. Run another story supporting those mountain families, and your mortgage application might face unexpected complications." Her voice cracked like thin ice when the editor told her exactly where she could file her threats. The federal discovery process opened corporate floodgates that made Vivian's team panic. Shell companies purchasing land throughout 3 counties. $15 million already invested in resort expansion. Purchase agreements contingent on exclusive recreational access to state forest lands. But here's where her hypocrisy really showed. Vivian's own property violated every ADA standard she claimed to champion. Steep stairs, no ramps, zero accessibility compliance. When our lawyers filed motions about her personal violations, the corporate mask shattered completely. "Those requirements don't apply to executive retreats," she snapped during deposition, apparently unaware the court reporter was documenting her every contradictory word. The legal team's incompetence was almost comical. They filed motions in the wrong jurisdiction twice. For $800 an hour, you'd think they could read a map in a calendar. Federal Judge Patricia Morrison wasn't amused. During sanctions hearing, she destroyed Vivian's legal team like they were first-year law students submitting plagiarized papers. This court will not tolerate exploitation of disability rights as corporate weapons. Complete legal collapse. ADA lawsuit dismissed with prejudice. Sanctions. $89,000 in attorney fees paid to our defense fund. Vivian's lawyers faced bar discipline for filing frivolous claims with fabricated evidence. But discovery had revealed the full scope of Pinnacle's mountain empire. $47 million committed to ski resort expansion, contingent on eliminating our trail by January 2024. Construction permits, employee contracts, marketing campaigns, all dependent on corporate control of public land access. Vivian's BMW hadn't been seen for a week. Word around town suggested meetings with problem solvers from out of state, people who handled obstacles that lawyers couldn't eliminate. The legal war was over. Something much more dangerous was beginning. The breakthrough came from the last place I expected, Vivian's own lawyers. Court-ordered discovery had forced her legal team to produce financial records they'd fought to keep buried. 47 bankers' boxes of corporate documents and investment agreements that smelled like expensive cologne and corporate desperation. I was sitting in my shop at 2 a.m., surrounded by legal paperwork that crinkled like autumn leaves, when I found the smoking gun buried in subsection 47C of Alpine Holdings LLC's corporate charter. The parent company wasn't some random investment group, it was Pinnacle Resort Development Corporation. $47 million committed to ski resort expansion, all contingent on one requirement: exclusive recreational access rights to state forest lands. My blood ran cold reading the timeline. Resort expansion broke ground spring 2024, assuming trail closure by January. Peak season reservations already booked through 2026. They weren't trying to silence our snowmobiles, they were monopolizing 12,000 acres of public wilderness for corporate profit. That's when I remembered grandfather's warning about reading every word of every contract. Digging through the 1963 files with hands that shook like January pine trees, I found something that stopped my heart. The original easement agreement included a reciprocal access clause that 60 years of corporate lawyers had completely missed. When grandfather Ezra granted the ski lodge access to his private road, he'd tied it directly to permanent trail rights with surgical precision. Breach of trail agreement by either party voids all reciprocal access privileges in perpetuity. My grandfather wasn't just protecting a trail. He'd been setting a legal bear trap for exactly this moment. The power shift hit like lightning. Vivian thought she was crushing some ignorant mountain family. She had no clue that eliminating our trail would trigger a clause destroying her $47 million empire. Property records confirmed grandfather's genius. He'd retained ownership of the crucial quarter-mile access route to the ski resort. Every chairlift, every lodge, every luxury chalet depended on crossing Thornfield land. No road access meant no ski resort, period. Back in my Army engineering days, we learned that reciprocal agreements create mutual vulnerability. Damage one side, lose everything on both sides. Private road access couldn't be seized through eminent domain for commercial use, especially when the original agreement had been violated first. The nuclear option crystallized with mathematical beauty. Trail closure would terminate Pinnacle's legal road access immediately. $47 million in investments would become worthless overnight. Construction permits would expire. Peak season bookings would face massive cancellation penalties. That yellowed contract felt heavier than lead between my calloused fingers. Every word chosen with the precision of a man who'd survived Normandy and corporate boardrooms with equal cunning. The moral case was ironclad. Pinnacle's scheme would privatize access to public lands that had belonged to mountain families for 2 centuries. Ancient hunting grounds would become exclusive resort amenities. Local heritage would be sold to corporate shareholders for quarterly profit margins. The irony was almost too perfect. Vivian had spent over $300,000 fighting for something that would bankrupt her own operation. She'd been demolishing her own foundation with expensive legal dynamite, one lawsuit at a time. But timing would determine everything. Peak ski season revenue, 75% of annual income, compressed into 6 weeks of powder and profit. Martin Luther King weekend alone represented over $1 million in bookings. Let them commit everything to peak season preparation, then trigger road closure during maximum financial exposure. Corporate greed would meet mountain justice with compound interest. Grandfather's contract went back into the shop's safe, but every clause was burned into my memory. Vivian thought she was ending our story. She'd actually been writing her own financial obituary, one arrogant legal move at a time. Building the perfect legal trap required patience, precision, and understanding corporate greed like a hunter studies prey patterns. I spread resort operational maps across my workbench, the paper crackling like kindling as I traced access routes with calloused fingers. Peak ski season, January 15th through February 28th, 6 weeks representing 75% of annual revenue. Martin Luther King weekend alone brought $1.2 million in bookings. Perfect timing meant letting them invest everything, then cutting their financial throat during maximum exposure. First priority, bulletproof surveillance infrastructure. Solar-powered trail cameras disguised as birdhouses positioned to document every HOA violation. The beauty of modern hunting technology, cellular upload means real-time evidence collection even if they discover and destroy the cameras. Motion sensors clicked like contented insects as I installed 12 units covering all approach routes. Here's a DIY nugget I learned from 30 years of equipment repair. Solar battery systems need 40% overcharge capacity for Montana winter conditions, plus backup lithium batteries rated to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. Corporate lawyers might be smart, but they don't understand mountain engineering. The surveillance network captured everything: Vivian's social media victory posts, HOA board members installing permanent concrete barriers, resort managers conducting site surveys for expansion projects, every piece of evidence time-stamped and GPS located with the precision of military intelligence gathering. But documentation was just step one. I hired Marcus Webb, retired FBI agent who'd spent 30 years hunting organized crime. His first observation: corporate conspiracy patterns look exactly like mob operations, just with better lawyers and fancier suits. Webb's counter-surveillance detected 3 different private investigation firms tracking my movements. Professional photography documented their vehicle licenses, equipment, and the moment one of them tried bribing my neighbor for access to my property. The smell of corporate desperation was becoming as recognizable as diesel exhaust on a cold morning. Community coordination required careful orchestration. Disabled veterans provided moral authority that corporate PR couldn't attack. Local environmental groups offered scientific credibility after exposing Vivian's fake ecological reports. Small business owners contributed meeting spaces and legal research time. The American Legion conference room became our command center, reeking of strong coffee and stronger determination to protect mountain heritage. Technical preparation meant understanding resort vulnerabilities with surgical precision. Peak season operations required 312 employees accessing the mountain daily. Kitchen deliveries, equipment maintenance, waste removal, emergency services, everything flowed through that single quarter-mile road my grandfather controlled. GPS tracking documented 847 daily vehicle trips during peak periods. I learned from my military engineering days that infrastructure dependency creates tactical advantages. Cut one critical supply line, paralyze entire operations. Resort management had built their empire assuming permanent road access, a fatal assumption about to become a very expensive lesson. Legal document preparation required federal court precision. Montana law allows private property owners to revoke road access with 24-hour written notice. No court approval needed. Commercial operations have zero right to continued access after material breach of underlying agreements. Emergency services retain access regardless. I wasn't endangering lives over corporate greed, just corporate profits. Physical trap components assembled like military equipment. Professional road closed signs manufactured to state specifications. Steel posts with concrete anchoring systems designed to stop commercial trucks. Alternative route maps showing the 90-mile mountain detour. Tow truck contracts for unauthorized vehicle removal. The backup systems covered every contingency. If they attempted legal injunctions, federal property rights law protected private landowners from commercial exploitation. If they tried eminent domain proceedings, the process required 2 years and fair compensation at current market rates. If Pinnacle offered buyouts, my price was set at $15 million, exactly what their resort investment would lose. But the most important preparation was psychological. December evening, I visited Grandfather Ezra's grave while snow fell like benediction on frozen ground. The granite headstone felt cold as mountain justice under my bare palm, wind through pine trees carrying echoes of his wartime wisdom about patience and precision timing. "You taught me that some fights are worth finishing properly," I whispered to the man who'd earned this moment 60 years ago. "Tomorrow we spring the trap you built." Financial calculations showed devastating potential impact. Daily peak revenue, $340,000. MLK weekend total, $1.2 million. Season pass holders, 2,847 customers averaging $1,400 each. Payroll disruption affecting 312 families who'd trusted corporate promises about permanent employment. January 13th, final documentation of trail agreement violations. January 14th, legal notices prepared and positioned. January 15th, road closure deployed during peak financial exposure. Corporate executives would arrive for investor presentations just as their access rights vanished. 4,000 weekend skiers would discover that mountain contracts have teeth. Vivian's victory celebration would become her bankruptcy announcement, broadcast live on social media platforms she'd used to mock mountain trash. Everything positioned with surgical precision, trail cameras recording, legal documents ready, community support mobilized. The only question? Would corporate arrogance provide the perfect trigger moment? Desperation makes people dangerous, and Vivian Blackthorne was running out of legal options fast. January 3rd brought her most brazen move yet. I was replacing brake pads on my truck when I heard heavy equipment rumbling up the mountain road. Not resort vehicles. This sounded like sabotage disguised as construction work. A contractor's crew had accidentally damaged our trail with a backhoe, creating deep ruts and destroying drainage systems that had taken 3 generations to perfect. The operator claimed equipment malfunction caused $15,000 in trail damage, demanding immediate payment or legal action for unsafe conditions created by property owner negligence. The whole scene reeked of manufactured crisis and expensive diesel fuel. But my surveillance cameras captured the real story. Audio recordings revealed the contractor admitting Vivian had paid an $8,000 bonus for creative accidents that would justify permanent trail closure. Video footage showed deliberate damage patterns impossible from actual equipment failure. Systematic destruction designed to look accidental. I let the damaged trail remain untouched. Sometimes the best evidence is what corporate criminals leave behind when they think they're being clever. The FBI investigation that followed was swift and merciless. Property destruction on federal easement land triggered automatic federal charges. The contractor flipped faster than a pancake when agents mentioned 20-year prison sentences, providing written statements detailing Vivian's sabotage conspiracy. But Vivian's desperation escalated beyond property damage into direct bribery attempts that made my blood boil. She approached Mayor Davidson with a $50,000 donation for municipal trail closure ordinances, offered County Sheriff Martinez a $25,000 consulting contract to avoid investigating HOA complaints, promised First National Bank exclusive resort banking relationships worth millions if they pressured my business loans. The stench of corruption hung over our town like smoke from a tire fire, making decent people sick with disgust. Sheriff Martinez wore an FBI wire during Vivian's cash offer meeting. The recording quality was crystal clear. Local people are too stupid to understand progress. A little financial encouragement will help them see reason. Local people. Like we were some subspecies that needed corporate guidance to function in the modern world. But her intimidation campaign spread beyond bribery into direct threats against families that supported our trail access. Anonymous letters with San Francisco postmarks. Middle school children harassed by private investigators asking about their parents' political views. Small business owners receiving mysterious insurance audits and tax investigations. The sound of black SUVs cruising Main Street became as common as morning coffee deliveries, their tinted windows reflecting nothing but corporate menace. I hired professional security for my family and shop. Trail cameras expanded to cover our home property. Digital evidence archives got stored in multiple secure locations, including safety deposit boxes in 3 different counties. If Vivian's masters wanted to escalate beyond legal warfare, we'd document every federal crime they committed. Federal investigators discovered the intimidation campaign connected to a broader pattern of corporate terrorism spanning 12 western states. Similar tactics used against rural families near potential resort development sites. Congressional hearings were already planned to examine corporate land acquisition strategies in recreational areas. But the most revealing moment came during a recorded phone conversation between Vivian and her Pinnacle handlers. Her voice cracked like thin ice under pressure as she explained how 3 legal defeats had cost them millions in delayed construction permits. "These mountain people don't understand they're fighting forces beyond their comprehension," she said, apparently unaware that federal surveillance had turned her own phone into a recording device. Pinnacle's internal emails, obtained through federal investigation warrants, painted a picture of corporate panic. Stock prices dropping as resort expansion delays became public knowledge. Board meetings focused on eliminating rural resistance to development projects. Executive compensation tied directly to regulatory compliance achievements in recreational land acquisition. The corporate mask had completely slipped. This wasn't about environmental protection or community development. This was about stealing public land access for private profit, using legal terrorism to crush anyone who resisted. But Vivian's biggest mistake was underestimating mountain people's capacity for patient revenge. January 10th marked the beginning of peak ski season. Resort bookings hit capacity. Every luxury chalet occupied at $600 per night. Chairlifts running at maximum capacity with 4,200 weekend skiers already committed to MLK weekend reservations. Corporate executives arrived from Denver for investor presentations showcasing the successful elimination of local recreational competition. Press releases announced exclusive mountain recreation experiences with enhanced privacy and security measures. The irony was beautiful. They were celebrating victory over the very people who held their financial survival in calloused mountain hands. My trail cameras documented their celebration party at the resort lodge, champagne corks popping like gunshots while they toasted progress over primitive mountain culture. Designer boots stomping on hardwood floors where my grandfather had once been welcomed as an honored guest. But none of them knew that their celebration was happening exactly 72 hours before I pulled the trigger on 60 years of accumulated mountain justice. The contract in my shop safe waited like a loaded gun. Corporate arrogance was about to meet precision-timed financial destruction. Martin Luther King weekend arrived with perfect powder conditions and corporate arrogance in full bloom. January 12th brought record resort activity that made my surveillance cameras work overtime. 4,200 skiers descended on luxury chalets like locusts in designer gear. Every chairlift packed, every restaurant booked solid, peak season revenue flowing like an avalanche of corporate cash. Pinnacle executives arrived Friday morning in chartered jets, briefcases full of expansion plans and champagne already chilling for victory celebrations. Their investor presentation promised complete elimination of local recreational interference and exclusive access to pristine wilderness experiences. The corporate victory party was scheduled for Saturday night at the main lodge, exactly 18 hours before I planned to destroy their entire operation. But first, Vivian needed to provide the final legal justification for my nuclear option. Friday afternoon, she filed her emergency injunction for permanent trail closure, claiming imminent public safety threat requiring immediate judicial intervention. The court hearing was scheduled for Tuesday, January 16th, the day after MLK weekend, when damage would already be catastrophic and irreversible. Her strategy was brutally simple. Present the federal judge with a fait accompli. Trail physically blocked, concrete barriers permanent, local opposition crushed under the weight of legal fees and corporate intimidation. Saturday morning brought construction crews installing the final piece of her legal trap. Concrete barriers with steel reinforcement across the trail entrance. Permanently closed, federal order signs that were completely fabricated but looked official enough to intimidate locals. Armed security guards hired to prevent trail access during the legal transition period. I watched from my truck as workers poured concrete that would never dry properly in January cold. The metallic scraping of steel reinforcement bars sounded like nails on a legal chalkboard, each piece of evidence for permanent intent to breach our 1963 contract. Vivian stood there filming the whole operation on her phone, probably preparing social media posts about finally civilizing this backward mountain area. Her designer boots crunched on frozen gravel where 3 generations of my family had maintained trail access through voluntary stewardship. "No more noise pollution from primitive mountain culture," she announced to her camera, apparently unaware that my surveillance system was recording her confession from multiple angles. The permanent barriers represented the material breach I needed. Not temporary inconvenience or seasonal closure, deliberate, systematic, permanent elimination of trail access in direct violation of Grandfather Ezra's 1963 agreement. But corporate celebration reached peak arrogance Saturday night. The pinnacle victory party at the main lodge included champagne toasts to progress over primitive local traditions. Board members presented quarterly projections showing $23 million in additional resort expansion, all dependent on successful elimination of recreational access competition. Marketing materials promised prospective investors exclusive mountain recreation without local interference. Press releases announced enhanced privacy and security measures that would protect our clientele from inappropriate local interactions. Local interference, inappropriate interactions. Corporate speak for crushing mountain families who'd been stewards of this land for generations. The party featured presentations showing computer-generated images of expanded resort facilities covering thousands of acres of public forest access, private helicopters for elite guests, exclusive hunting grounds for corporate clients, 200-year-old wildlife migration routes converted to golf course fairways. My trail cameras captured every toast, every presentation slide, every corporate executive celebrating the theft of public land access for private profit. Audio recordings documented their casual discussion of eliminating rural resistance through strategic legal pressure and financial intimidation. But none of them understood that their celebration was happening on borrowed time measured in hours, not years. Sunday morning, January 14th, I completed final preparations for legal nuclear deployment. Professional road closure signs loaded in my truck, steel posts and concrete anchoring systems ready for installation, alternative route maps printed showing the 90-mile detour around mountain ranges, legal notices prepared for simultaneous delivery to resort management, county sheriff, and federal court. The evidence package was comprehensive, 847 pages documenting systematic violations of our 1963 trail agreement, video footage of permanent barrier installation, audio recordings of corporate executives celebrating elimination of local access rights, financial documents proving $47 million investment based on false assumptions about road access permanence. Federal court filing included counter-injunction motions protecting private property rights under Montana state law and federal constitutional provisions. Private road access termination following material breach of underlying easement agreements was legally bulletproof. Sunday evening, I visited Grandfather Ezra's grave one final time before triggering his 60-year-old legal trap. Snow fell like benediction on granite headstone that bore his name and military service dates. The wind through pine trees carried echoes of his wartime wisdom about patience, precision timing, and knowing exactly when to strike for maximum devastation. "Tomorrow, we finish what you started," I whispered to frozen ground that held the bones of the man who'd engineered this moment of mountain justice. Corporate executives were sleeping soundly in luxury chalets, probably dreaming of stock options and quarterly bonuses. 4,000 weekend skiers had paid premium prices for mountain access they assumed was guaranteed forever. None of them knew they'd wake up trapped in the most expensive legal mistake of their corporate lives. Monday, January 15th, 6 a.m., Martin Luther King Day, the most expensive morning in corporate resort history. I arrived at the road junction in pre-dawn darkness, headlights cutting through mountain air that smelled like snow and 60 years of accumulated justice. 12 veterans from the American Legion followed in convoy, their truck beds loaded with steel posts, concrete mix, and professional road closure signs that would change everything. The sound of metal on stone rang like church bells as we anchored the first road closed private property sign at the exact property line Grandfather Ezra had surveyed in 1963. Each hammer blow echoed off granite cliffs like gunshots announcing the end of corporate tyranny. By 6:47 a.m., the trap was set. The first resort employee, a lift operator named Danny who'd worked the mountain for 15 years, discovered our roadblock during his regular morning commute. His radio call to resort management triggered a panic that spread through luxury chalets like wildfire. "Base, this is Danny. We got a serious problem. Road's completely blocked. Professional signs, steel barriers, the whole 9 yards. Nobody's getting to work today." Within minutes, the mountain communication systems lit up like Christmas trees. Ski patrol couldn't reach their positions. Kitchen staff couldn't deliver breakfast to 4,000 hungry guests. Maintenance crews couldn't access chairlift operations. The entire resort infrastructure ground to a halt with the precision of a Swiss watch hitting a granite wall. My drone footage captured the visual impact with devastating clarity. 3 miles of luxury SUVs backed up like a funeral procession. Resort parking lots emptying as overnight guests realized they were trapped in an expensive mountain prison. Chairlifts hanging motionless against perfect powder backdrop. Millions of dollars in infrastructure rendered useless by one strategic road closure. 8:15 a.m. brought the confrontation I'd been waiting 60 years to witness. Vivian's hired limousine crunched up the gravel road, followed by 3 cars full of corporate lawyers and Pinnacle executives who'd flown in for their victory celebration. The smell of expensive cologne and panic sweat filled the mountain air as they realized their weekend triumph had become a Monday morning nightmare. "You can't do this!" Vivian screamed, designer boots slipping on icy gravel as she charged toward our road barriers like some demented fashion model. "I own this mountain!" That's when I pulled out the yellowed contract that had been waiting for this exact moment since 1963. "Read your grandfather's agreement, lady. Breach our trail rights, lose your road access. Basic contract law they probably should have taught you in those fancy law schools." The corporate lawyers went white as January snow when they realized what they'd overlooked. Reciprocal easements, mutual dependency, 60 years of legal vulnerability they'd never bothered to research. County Sheriff Martinez arrived with federal marshals and news crews that turned our property line into a media circus. Local television, regional newspapers, and 3 different cable networks filmed the most expensive property rights confrontation in Montana history. "This is private property," Sheriff Martinez announced to the Pinnacle executives. "Mr. Thornfield has legal right to control access to his road. Your resort operations don't override private property rights under Montana state law." The FBI served arrest warrants for bribery and conspiracy charges while network television recorded every moment. Vivian's handcuffs clicked like silver justice in morning sunlight as federal agents read charges that would put her away for years. Corporate panic reached fever pitch as resort implications became clear. 4,000 guests demanding refunds for inaccessible vacation packages. 312 employees unable to reach their jobs. Peak season revenue evaporating like morning frost under legal heat. Pinnacle board members made frantic phone calls to corporate headquarters while standing beside their luxury vehicles, trapped on the wrong side of a property line that separated them from $47 million in stranded resort investment. "What do you want?" demanded Pinnacle CEO Marcus Whitfield, sweat beading on his forehead despite 20-degree temperatures. "Same thing my grandfather wanted," I replied, holding up the 1963 contract for news cameras, respect for mountain families, and the legal agreements that protect our heritage. The media circus reached maximum intensity as reporters realized they were witnessing David versus Goliath played out with corporate millions and constitutional property rights. Network news helicopters circled overhead while cable television broadcast live coverage of Montana mountain justice. Financial markets reacted immediately. Pinnacle stock dropped 37% in pre-market trading. Resort construction permits faced immediate suspension pending federal investigation outcomes. Insurance companies canceled coverage due to criminal activity by corporate officers. But the most satisfying moment came when Dr. Elena Vasquez arrived with the court order removing concrete barriers from our family trail within 24 hours. 60 years of tradition restored by federal judicial decree while corporate executives stood helpless behind our property line. The sound of the first snowmobile echoing off granite cliffs that afternoon was the sweetest music I'd ever heard. 3 generations of Thornfield stewardship vindicated by mountain justice delivered with precision timing and legal dynamite. Corporate arrogance had met its match in the form of one yellowed contract and the mountain family that kept its promises. 6 months later, justice had been served with mountain-sized portions and corporate-sized consequences. Vivian Blackthorne pleaded guilty to federal bribery, conspiracy, and fraud charges in a Denver courtroom that smelled like expensive lawyers and cheap excuses. 3 years federal prison plus $2.3 million restitution, every dollar of which went directly into community benefit programs that would protect mountain heritage for generations. Judge Patricia Morrison's sentencing was poetry in legal motion. Corporate terrorism against rural communities will be met with the full force of federal law. Mountain families deserve the same legal protections as multinational corporations. Pinnacle Resort Development Corporation faced complete financial collapse. $15 million in fines, surrendered development rights, and bankruptcy proceedings that scattered their board members like startled deer. The resort property sold at 60% loss to the Rocky Mountain Conservation Trust, local ownership ensuring local families would never lose mountain access again. But the real victory was community healing that spread like wildfire through grateful families. The Ezra Thornfield Trail Preservation Endowment provided $50,000 annually for trail maintenance, emergency rescue services, and environmental stewardship. Local high school graduates received college scholarships for studying environmental science, land management, and constitutional law, ensuring the next generation would be equipped to fight corporate land grabs with education and legal knowledge. 312 resort jobs were restored under community ownership, with profit-sharing arrangements that kept tourism revenue in mountain families instead of corporate offshore accounts. Annual income from resort operations funded local infrastructure improvements, volunteer fire department equipment, and emergency medical services. The personal healing for my family was deeper than mountain springs. Sarah and I renewed our marriage vows at the restored trailhead where grandfather Ezra had first fought for access rights 60 years ago. Our children, now teenagers, understood they'd inherited more than land. They'd inherited responsibility for protecting mountain heritage against future corporate predators. The machine shop received contracts for trail maintenance equipment fabrication, emergency rescue gear manufacturing, and custom work for conservation organizations throughout the region. Honest work serving community needs instead of fighting legal wars against corporate invaders. Federal legislation emerged from congressional hearings on corporate intimidation of rural communities. The Thornfield Act strengthened protection for historical easements, increased penalties for false environmental reporting, and established legal aid funds for rural families facing corporate land acquisition pressure. I testified before the Senate Judiciary Subcommittee as expert witness on conservation easement protection. The committee room smelled like marble justice and constitutional principles as I explained how grandfather's 1963 contract had become a model for protecting rural heritage against corporate exploitation. Private property rights and community stewardship create stronger environmental protection than corporate development, I told senators who actually listened to mountain wisdom for once. The ripple effects spread across western states like mountain avalanches of accountability. 23 rural communities contacted our legal team for assistance fighting similar corporate land grabs. The precedent we'd established, reciprocal easements protecting community access to public lands, became the gold standard for rural property rights litigation. Documentary film rights sold to an independent production company, with proceeds funding additional conservation easements throughout Montana. Mountain Justice, the Thornfield Trail story, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, bringing national attention to corporate threats against rural communities. But the sweetest victory was restoring annual traditions that connect generations of mountain families. Ezra's Run Memorial Snowmobile ride drew 400 participants the following January. The sound of two-stroke engines harmonizing across granite cliffs was Freedom's orchestra playing mountain melodies that corporate money could never silence. Trail markers now include bronze plaques honoring grandfather's military service and legal victory. Ezra Thornfield, 1918 to 1995, defender of mountain freedom. Some rights are worth fighting for. Community barbecues at the restored trailhead became monthly celebrations of local heritage protected against corporate invasion. The smell of honest barbecue smoke and pine sap mixed with children's laughter, the aroma of community victory over manufactured privilege. Looking ahead, new challenges require constant vigilance against corporate predators who never stop hunting for vulnerable rural communities. Next month, city developers versus Amish farmland, when agricultural heritage meets corporate greed. Because the war between community values and corporate profits never really ends. It just moves to new battlefields where decent people need legal ammunition to protect their heritage.
So that's Garrett, MLK Wicked, watching 4,000 skis slowly realize they can't get off the mountain. All because Vivian thought she could permanently shut down his family's snowmobile trail with a little concrete and some very expensive lawyers. She spent months escalating things, fake environmental reports, ADA lawsuits, even trying to bribe the sheriff. Each time getting louder, more desperate. Meanwhile, Garrett was quietly reading a contract from 1963, the one his grandfather left behind, the one that tied their trails right directly to a ski resort road access. Break one, you lose the other. See, Vivian kept trying to make him react, get emotional, do something stupid she could use in court, but he did not. He just documented everything and let her dig her own grave a little deeper each time. And when she finally poured permanent concrete barriers across his trail, that was it. Material breach of contract, road closed, and $47 million ski resort suddenly worthless. 3 years in federal prison, $2.3 million in restitution. All because she couldn't just leave a mountain family alone. Ever had someone keep pushing, trying to get you to lose your cool? How did you handle it? Did you give them the reaction they wanted? Or did you play the long game? Like this. If watching Vivian's story made your day, subscribe for more stories about places within corporate bullying. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting people destroy themselves while you hold the contracts.